Today we will be continuing with Chapter 4, Reproduction and Control. We will be starting Section 4.2, The Endocrine System Helps Regulate Body Conditions. There are three key concepts for this section. The first one is hormones are the body's chemical messengers. Glands produce and release hormones. And the last one is that the control of the endocrine system includes feedback mechanisms. So what is the endocrine system? The endocrine system controls the conditions in your body by making and sending chemicals, and these chemicals are what is known as hormones. And these hormones, they're able to move from one part of the body to another part. And in the second part, they will bring about a change. So the endocrine system is more or less controlled by the nervous system. So that includes your central nervous system. All the functions of the endocrine system happen automatically. So we do not have control over the endocrine system and when we can release and stop releasing hormones. If you take a look at the figure I provided, you could see that the secreting cell is releasing or secreting small blue circles, and that is the hormones in this diagram. So this hormone is going to travel through the blood vessel and it's going to reach the target cell where it is going to bind to the receptor, and when it binds to the receptor, then it's going to bring about a change. In our body, we have several different hormones, and every single hormone will have different functions. So some hormones may control the level of other hormones, while some hormones control or regulate the level of chemicals such as glucose and salt in your blood. Also, the synthesis or production of some hormones is very much affected by the time in which you are in your life, or how old you are. So for example, sex hormones such as testosterone and estrogen, they'll only start to be produced during adolescence. So that's when you start to hit puberty. So this diagram here just shows a bunch of different hormones, and you can see that every single hormone has a different target cell, okay, in different organs. So we're going to be talking more about this later on. Glands produce and release hormones. So in the endocrine system, we said hormones are released, but where are they released from? They're released from organs known as glands. And many glands produce hormones and release them into your circulatory system, which, if you recall, includes all the blood vessels. So that's arteries, veins, and capillaries. So now we're going to take a look at the different endocrine glands that our body has. The first one, and perhaps one of the most important ones, is the pituitary gland. And this gland is located right at the base of the at the base of the brain and right above the roof of the mouth. And its secretions are controlled by the hypothalamus, which is another endocrine gland. These two together always tend to work hand in hand, and they form the connection between the nervous and the endocrine system. The third gland is the pineal gland. Now this is a tiny organ buried deep inside the brain, and it is sensitive to different levels of light and is essential to the rhythms such as sleep, body temperature, reproduction, and aging. So this has a very systematic means of controlling things, okay? The fourth one is the thyroid gland, which is located in your neck. So this releases hormones that's necessary for growth and metabolism, and also produces and stores the very important thyroid hormone. And this is important for the metabolism of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And the thyroid gland also produces calcitonin hormone, which is a calcium ion regulator. So this will help to regulate the calcium levels in your blood. So you could see that the thyroid gland has many different functions. The thymus is the fifth gland we'll be talking about, and this is located in your chest. At birth, it continues to grow until you hit puberty. When you hit puberty, it will start to gradually decrease in size, and eventually, when you're old and shriveled, it would be also old and shriveled, okay? So this thymus is responsible for producing white blood cells, and if you remember, we talked about white blood cells such as T cells and B cells, okay? The sixth gland that we'll be talking about is the adrenal gland. These are located right on top of the kidneys, and they secrete about 30 different hormones that regulate carbohydrate, protein, and fat metabolism, as well as the water and salt levels in your body. Also, it is responsible for the secretion of the hormone known as adrenaline. And if you remember, that is part of the sympathetic nervous system that will cause the release of adrenaline, and this is the flight and fight hormone. So this is a very important hormone as it will help you to know how to react in stressful situations. The pancreas is part of the digestive and endocrine system. The part that is associated with the endocrine system is that it produces two hormones known as insulin and glucagon, and both these hormones will help to regulate glucose levels in the blood. Ovaries and testes are also endocrine glands because ovaries will produce estrogen, which is a sex hormone, and the testes will produce testosterone, which is another sex hormone. Now, these are just a few of the glands. We also have other hormones that are produced. So some organs such as the heart and kidneys also produce hormones, but they're not considered part of the endocrine system. Okay, so those 8 that I just listed, you will have to know them, and you will have to know that they are associated with the endocrine system and considered to be glands. So the next slide shows you a figure of the endocrine system, and I included this so that you can have an orientation of where every single gland is located. So the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the pineal gland, those are all located within the brain. In the throat, you'll have the thyroid gland, and the chest, that's where you'll have the thymus. However, it is not shown in this figure. Then around the abdomen area, you're going to have the pancreas, and in the lower back, you're going to have the kidneys along with the adrenal glands, which are the yellow structures located on top of the kidneys. Then in the groin area, that's where you're going to find the testes and ovaries. So I will want you to have some sort of, an idea about the orientation of the different glands, so where they are located. So the next question you may ask yourself is, how is the endocrine system controlled? And it is basically controlled by a feedback mechanism. So remember, the same point that keeps reappearing every single time is that the body needs to stay in a state of homeostasis, and this is when the body is in complete balance and works at its best. So, since hormones are powerful chemicals capable of producing dramatic changes, their level in the body has to be carefully controlled. And how are they carefully controlled? It's through the action of negative feedback mechanism. So this negative feedback mechanism is basically that the final effect of the response was going to go back and turn off the response in order to maintain homeostasis. So let me just explain this using the figure provided. So remember, we have the glands here are the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the thyroid gland. So those are the 3 glands that we see here. So the hypothalamus will release the first hormone known as TRH. This TRH is going to go to the pituitary gland and stimulate it to secrete another hormone known as TSH. This TSH hormone will then travel in the circulatory system, go to the thyroid gland, and stimulate it to produce and secrete the hormone thyroxine. Now, thyroxine is the final effect of the response. So thyroxine will then go all the way back to the hypothalamus, traveling in the circulatory system, and once thyroxine reaches a very high amount, the hypothalamus is going to detect the high levels of thyroxine and decrease the release of TRH. Now, the decrease in the release of TRH from the hypothalamus is going to cause a decrease in the release of TSH from the pituitary gland. And this will cause less levels of TSH to reach the thyroid gland, and therefore thyroxine levels will decrease. So I want you to use this diagram and listen to this part over and over again so that you get a thorough understanding. So remember, in negative feedback, it's the final effect, in this case thyroxine, that is going to go back to the very beginning and turn off the hypothalamus secretion of TRH. Okay? It will also have an effect at the pituitary gland as well. So what we just saw in the previous slide was negative feedback. Why? Because it is decreasing the level of the final hormone. Now we also have positive feedback. So the outcome of a positive feedback mechanism is not to maintain homeostasis, but to produce a response that continues to increase. So, for example, when you cut yourself, chemicals are released from the damaged tissue to signal a blood clot to form. Now the process of clotting causes more chemicals to form that increases the clotting action of the blood in the area of the injury. So you could see here that when you start to have an open wound and the clot forms, the clot formation itself is going to cause more chemicals to be produced to increase the clotting. And this just keeps going on and on, okay? So in positive feedback, you're going to get levels continuously rising, where in homeostasis, you're going to get levels to decrease so that you can maintain homeostasis, because that is essentially the end result or what you want from negative feedback mechanism responses. So now that you know about negative feedback and positive feedback responses, hormones also take part in balanced hormone action. So this is when the action of one hormone is often balanced by the action of another. So for example, the pancreas produces hormones that's known as insulin and glucagon. Now insulin and glucagon, they actually work opposite to one another. So in the blood, when you have high glucose levels, insulin is going to be secreted and released, and this is going to promote the uptake and storage of glucose. However, when you start to have very low glucose levels, then glucagon is going to be produced and secreted in order to promote the release of glucose from storage areas and into the blood. Okay, so you could see that insulin and glucagon, they have a balancing effect, so that the best amount and level of glucose can be maintained in your blood. Now, why is this so important, this hormone balance? So let's take a look at the opposite end of the spectrum when you have a hormone imbalance. So this is when you have too little or too much of any hormone. And remember, too little or too much is going to cause a serious effect and usually tends to lead to disease with the case of insulin. So when the body produces too little insulin, what's going to happen is that you're not going to have a hormone present in the blood to promote the uptake and storage of glucose. So glucose levels in the blood are going to be very, very high. Now these high levels can ultimately damage the circulatory system and kidneys. So this is what is known as diabetes. So diabetes is treatable by taking synthetic insulin shots to replace the insulin that is not being produced by the body. So by taking insulin shots, you're going to ensure that there's enough insulin in the blood system to promote the uptake and storage of glucose so that there are not crazy amounts of glucose levels in your blood.